Welcome back to Off The Schneid. Today we're going to be taking a look at the official OTS top 10 running back rankings heading into the 2022 NFL Draft. There's one player in particular that's not in these rankings that I think I'll catch some heat for, but it is what it is. It's just I didn't like what I saw on tape, and I know a lot of people are going to disagree with me. So prepare yourself for some spicy takes. But let's kick it off. At number 10, we've got Kevin Harris from South Carolina. Player comp I have for him is Peyton, Barber. I think they play similarly in that they're most likely, well, I know what Peyton Barber is, but I think Kevin Harris is most likely going to be a first and second down back. I don't anticipate that he's much of a pass catching back out of the backfield, but he's one of those guys that I think will get underdrafted, but a team will draft to be as their backup running back. And, given an injury or potentially just the opportunity, I think he can succeed, and I think he'll be a quality player in the league. If you look through his stat line there, he actually outpaced Najee Harris in the SEC in 2020, obviously when Najee Harris was still in college. He outpaced him on the ground and had more rushing yards, 15 touchdowns. He was a little bit banged up, had some surgeries, he was injured, but definitely showed out in their bowl game. I can't remember the bowl game, but I did watch the entire game. I actually watched it live, and he had a fantastic game. They played really well in that game. Actually, it was actually a fun watch, to be honest with you. I recommend checking it out if you haven't. Looking at the combine, he didn't run a 40, and that's going to be everybody's concern. He's a big guy. I think he was 5'10", 220. So he's a big dude, and once he gets that momentum from what I saw on tape, he can break away from guys, and he does have that explosion. He was top 3 in both the vertical jump and the broad jump at the combine with 30 running backs. So he's definitely got that explosion. It's just, I don't think he has that top end speed, which is not the end of the world. I think that's just not the way he's gonna be playing in the NFL anyways. But there you go. He's a guy that I really like. I think that, like I said, given the opportunity or if an injury occurs, I think he can play well in the NFL. So let me know what you think in the comments, but we're kicking it off at number 10 with Kevin Harris. Next up at number 9, we've got Hassan Haskins from Michigan. Player comp I have for him is Carlos Hyde. I'm not quite sure how I actually feel about that comp, if I'm being honest with myself and you guys. He was a tough guy to comp, if I'm being real with you. He's big. He's a big dude, 6'2", 220. The concern with him is going to be with the 40 time. There's a number attached to him, and it's 4.74. That number has been attached to him since basically high school. But in high school, I think there was a big concern for him or deciding factor about where he was going to play. He was a double-digit sack guy, on average in high school as a defensive end type of a player, outside linebacker, whatever, pass rusher in high school. So I think maybe he was thinking that was going to be his future. Made the switch to running back and played really well. Obviously, this past season was by far his most dominant year, but I just think that this is a touchdown guy. He's going to be touchdown dependent in the NFL. He's not going to get, that many carries and yards and stuff like that. He only averaged 4.9 yards per carry last year on a lot of touches. So that's not, screaming that he's going to have success in the NFL, if I'm being honest with you. But I think as a goal line carry guy, just a, Marion Barber type of a guy where he's going to have maybe, 600 yards, but double-digit touchdown sort of a thing. And I think that he can be that guy. So in certain fantasy formats, I think that there's certainly value there. He had 20 touchdowns this past season, with 5 coming in one game against Ohio State. It's not like he did it against, Indiana even, and they're actually pretty good, so I shouldn't have used them as an example, but you know what I mean. He's going to be a touchdown dependent guy, but I think that, again, much like Kevin Harris, I think that if he gets an opportunity, he can carry the load. And he's a bit of a grinder. He's just going to chip away, and then break one off or get to the goal line and score a touchdown there. He's going to be tough to stop in that regard. In my opinion, he won't offer much, if any at all, as a pass catcher. He was basically just, chip and flat, and a check down type of a guy at Michigan. Not that they asked him to do a crazy amount there. Had 18 catches, and honestly, almost, I think every single catch that I saw was a chip and a flat and just a dump off. So that's all he's going to offer at the NFL level if he's even asked to do that. So there you go. Let me know what you think in the comments on number 9. I got Hassan Haskins from Michigan. At number 8, we got Brian Robinson from Alabama. Player comp I have is Ramondre Stevenson. I couldn't fit, obviously, his full name in there. It is what it is. I think that they'll be used the same way at the next level. I think that they caught the ball in the same, the same clip type of a thing in college. 35 catches, 296, and 2 touchdowns catching the ball for Alabama, but I just don't think that he's going to be asked to do that in the NFL, much like Ramondre Stevenson is not right now, and he won't be most likely moving forward either. So the interesting thing with Brian Robinson was, that he chose to stick it out and stay in Tuscaloosa for the full 5 years. He was pretty highly touted prospect out of high school. So I was relatively surprised to see him, once I learned that and did a little more digging, that he stayed at Alabama for the full 5 years and didn't get a shot either. Guys like Jerome Ford left, and then there's, Najee Harris obviously was there for a few years that got the opportunity that he didn't. Not that he didn't play. I mean, 96, 91 carries, 271 obviously last year, as the team's bell cow. 5 yards a carry, 14 touchdowns. There's nothing wrong with that. He tested really well at the combine as well. 6'2", 225, and ran a 4.53. That's quite impressive. Had a decent broad jump, decent vertical. So, realistically, he's athletic enough to get the job done. That's why, and he's more athletic than the guys that I put, below him, Haskins and Kevin Harris. But I think they're all going to play a similar type of a role in the NFL and be a little more, touchdown dependent fantasy wise. But I think they'll all be capable backups at the NFL level for a real NFL team type of a thing. So I definitely like Brian Robinson, but I think there's some other guys in this draft that can do a little bit more than him. And this is kind of that tier where they're all three of these guys are the same. And I think he's the cream of the crop out of those three. So there you go. Number 8, Brian Robinson from Alabama. All right, we're going to start to get spicy here. At number 7, I've got Ty Chandler from North Carolina. Player comp I have for him is Miles Sanders. And you might be saying, Miles Sanders is a much better pass catcher than Ty Chandler. I would be a little bit inclined to disagree with that, as we've seen in the NFL and, the Eagles adding a pass catcher in Kenny Gainwell. So I think he can catch the ball just as well. And I think he's going to be a little underrated in that regard as a pass catcher. But I think he can absolutely get the job done there. Let's start at the combine. He weighed in at 205 pounds, which I was happy to see, 204 to be exact. I was happy to see that. 5'11", ran a 4.38, which is quite fast, especially for a decent size like that. He's not a small back, that's for sure. He can definitely get the job done, and he hits the hole pretty hard once he sees it, when he is running the ball. He never particularly got an opportunity at Tennessee, to be the number one guy, the bell cow, the 3-down back type of a thing. His yards per carry weren't exactly there, but, an opportunity obviously opened up at North Carolina. He transferred over and he showed out. He looked fantastic. 1,000 yards, only 182 carries, 600 in his career. That's quite a bit, but only 182 as a senior, 1,092 yards, 13 touchdowns. I think he had 7 catches in one game of that 15 he had as a Tar Heel. 1 touchdown there. So, I love the production, if I'm being honest with you, especially, and it's another knock against Sam Howell as well. Not a knock, but just something that comes up with Sam Howell is that offensive line was pretty god-awful at North Carolina. But, he was able to have 6 yards per carry and be very productive, I thought. Especially, with only 15 catches, 216 yards. So that's pretty much all, yak, but it's different with running backs. I understand that. He didn't get an invitation to the Senior Bowl, which I would have rather have seen him go to the Senior Bowl, but he got a chance to shine at the East-West Shrine Bowl. And he did well in practices throughout, and then he showed out in the game. He had 69 yards and I think 1 catch for 8 yards. I don't think he had any touchdowns. He did have a fumble that was recovered by the offense, but he played really, really well in that game. So, it might be spicy, and I don't think I've seen anybody else have him this high, at least not on like a public forum like this. So he's a guy that I really like. Number 7, Chandler from North Carolina. At number 6, I have James Cook from Georgia. Player comp I have for him is Tony Pollard. I think that he might be the number 1 pass catching back in this year's draft. I really, really like what he can do out of the backfield as far as a pass catcher is concerned. His blocking does concern me a little bit, but most college running backs can improve in that area. The biggest, thing that might hinder him, especially with that blocking, is his size. I would really like to see him put on a few more pounds. I think he did that heading into the combine, so he could be as heavy as possible, and potentially that hurt his 40 time. I don't know. I mean, his 40 was 4.42. There's nothing wrong with that whatsoever, but I feel like, he was trying to put on some weight. He weighed in at 199 pounds at 5'11". I would like to see, at least 5 to 10 more pounds on there without losing any speed, just so he can hold up at the NFL level. The NFL is moving towards, I feel like anyways, and I'll talk about this a lot more later, not in this episode, but as things go on, another story for another day. I think that running backs, those bruisers, those big pounders are going to be guys that teams are looking for, on the goal line and that sort of a thing. But the pass catchers will absolutely still obviously have a role. Looking at his stat line, he never was, and he was never going to be a featured back at Georgia. They just don't particularly do that. They never particularly have. Not that there hasn't been, 1,000-yard rushers and that sort of a thing, but there's always been that other guy to go along with them. In this case, Zamir White, who is another fantastic running back in this year's draft. But, as far as the pass catching is concerned, only 27, but, it showed up on tape, and he had a fantastic college football playoffs, which I think, for me, it boosted him up this board, because when I originally started doing my rankings and watching earlier tape throughout the college season, I didn't have James Cook that high. I really wasn't super high on him. But then, when the games really mattered, he showed up and he looked fantastic. So I just had to move him up, and I've been liking him more and more and more. And, if you follow me on Twitter and you see my best ball exposure, you'll see James Cook's name pretty high on my running back exposure board. So there you go. But there it is. That's just how I feel about him. I really like him. He's been going up my board. His yards per carry is fantastic, which I like to see. He can catch the ball. There's a potential that he can be, a 3-down back in the NFL. At the very least, he's going to have a role early, and that's more than we can say about a bunch of these other running backs that are in these rankings. So there you go. Number 6, James Cook from Georgia. Getting into the top 5 now, I've got Jerome Ford from Cincinnati. Player comp I have for him is Elijah Mitchell. Biggest thing about Jerome Ford for me was his actual tape. He really, really popped off for me. He's got really good lateral movement, good bounce. He can make those good cuts. I'm not going to say LT like, because nobody did it like LaDainian Tomlinson, but he's got those kind of traits that I just absolutely loved. And then great space in the open field. Little unnatural as a pass catcher, but I think he can get by, which, similar to a guy like Elijah Mitchell. I thought he might be a little quicker at the combine. He ran a 4.46. Not that that's not fast, because it's pretty quick. I just thought he looked a little faster on tape, with the potential to get into the 4.3s like Chandler type of a thing. Weighed in at 210 pounds at the combine, which was again a little bit surprising. He was listed at 220. I knew for a fact there's no way he was 220, but 210 was actually relatively surprising. I expected more closer to 200 pounds, so that's good to see. 5'10 and a half, like I said, 210, good size, good speed, everything like that. He has all the tools to be a 3-down back, not necessarily going to be catching the ball a ton out of the backfield, but I think he can get there, and those are things that he can learn. He just didn't do it a ton. He only really had the 1 year of starting experience with Cincinnati, was a highly touted recruit out of high school, went to Alabama. That was a stacked backfield. field. It always is. And, he didn't want to wait like, a guy like Brian Robinson. So he, transfers over to Cincinnati, which is another very good program right now that's improving. And, I think he saw that, went there and excelled. He had a fantastic season, 1,300 yards, over 6 yards per carry, 19 touchdowns with one through the air. So yeah, he's a guy that really popped off for me in the tape watching process. That was where it landed for me, and realistically nothing else did it for me. It was the tape. I mean, he tested just fine, but it was the tape that ultimately made me have to have him here. I just couldn't put any of the guys behind him ahead of him. I really couldn't. So there you go. Number 5, we've got Jerome from Cincinnati. All right, this is by far the spiciest take that I have. At number 4, I've got Kennedy Brooks out of Oklahoma. Player comp I have for him is Sony Michel. I think that's a bang on comp. He's just a pure runner, and he's for sure the highest ranked pure runner that I have. And, maybe he deserves to fall down these rankings a little bit, but I really liked what I saw on tape. And there's some other things about him that I do really like, including that, final 2 years in high school, he had over 6,000 yards. That's insane. He won the Tom Landry Award as the best player to come out of high school in Texas, which, it's Texas football, so that's not for nothing, absolutely. He obviously committed to Oklahoma, redshirted as a true freshman due to a little bit of I think it was a shoulder injury or something like that. And then played as a redshirt freshman. 8.9 yards per carry is very, very, very impressive. 12 touchdowns, 1,000 yards. Then as a sophomore, 6 touchdowns, 1,000 yards. Obviously, he's had 1,000 yards every year. Didn't offer much as a pass catcher. And like I said, he won't at the NFL level. So maybe that does, deserve for him to fall down these rankings a little bit, but I just really enjoyed watching him run the ball on tape. He's got excellent balance. He bounces off tacklers. He keeps his feet moving for extra yards. I think that, of the guys before him, like the Hassan Haskins, Kevin Harris, Brian Robinson, guys like that, he's a step ahead those guys, in my opinion. So yeah, then he sat out in 2020 due to obviously COVID. Comes back. He could have declared, he could have went pro right after that, but he decided to come back for one more year. 6.3 yards per carry, a 7 yards per carry average on 472 yards. For me, that's really impressive. It is in the Big 12. It's not like he's doing it, in the Conference USA or something like that, right? So it's pretty impressive to me. At the combine, 5'11", 210, 209 to be exact. He's got small hands, which, is obviously probably a reason he's not much of a pass catcher. He's only got 7 5/8 size hands. Those are quite small, but, more than big enough to hold on to a football when you're running. So I'm not concerned about that. I would have liked to see his speed, because he did look faster to me on tape. I would have liked to have seen him run faster than he did. He ran a 4.59. I would have liked that in the low 4.5s, maybe high 4.4s if he could have, but it is what it is. It's certainly not slow, but I would have liked to have seen him run a little quicker. He had an absolutely massive Alamo Bowl. He was the MVP. He had like 150 total yards, roughly 3 touchdowns. That was against Oregon as well. Not a bad team or a bad defense or anything like that. And he had a great game. So this is just a guy that I couldn't move down. I just couldn't. So I know I'm going to take some heat for this one, but the Off The Schneid motto, if you're afraid to be wrong, you'll never be right. So there it is. Number 4, Kennedy Brooks from Oklahoma. Kicking off the top 3, I think everybody knew if you watched this entire episode who the top 3 would be as we got to this point. I got Isaiah Spiller from Texas A&M. Player comp I have for him is David Montgomery. I think that they can catch the ball in a similar fashion, similar ways, and run the ball similarly as well. David Montgomery is probably a little bit bigger, but I'm not really concerned with the size of Isaiah Spiller. At the combine, he measured in at 6 foot even, 217 pounds. I don't mind that. Maybe he could add a little more weight, like 220 is fine. I mean, his size is fine. Actually, I'm not too worried about it whatsoever. His 40 time was a bit of a concern, but everybody at the Texas A&M Pro Day ran slow. So I'm not sure if it was all, legit timed. If I'm being honest, everybody ran extremely slow. Jalen Weidermeyer, I said it in the tight end episode about him. He was over 5. And, while I don't think he's the most athletic, I don't think he's a 5.04 40 time sort of a thing. So I don't know what's going on there, but I think he's, 4.5s roughly right around there. He can catch the ball. He can be a 3-down running back. But the things that really, actually, let's look at his stat line here first. In the SEC, 3 years of consistent production, on average 1,000 yards a season roughly. 541 carries. He definitely got the job done. 5.5 yards per carry, 25 touchdowns. Obviously that, kind of dwindled as he got on in his career. 1 touchdown as a receiver, which is, nothing, it's not much to say for running backs. They're not going to catch a ton of touchdown passes, but I would have liked to seen a little more considering he did have that production. The big thing that I really liked about Isaiah Spiller, number one, he's a good blocker, a quite good blocker. Maybe the best, to be honest, maybe the best blocker in this class, up there anyways. But the biggest thing was he was used as a fullback, which, when you're the star running back for a big program like Texas A&M and you're being asked to be the fullback for, I think he's a freshman or he's a younger guy anyways, not a lot of guys are going to be open to doing that, if I'm being honest. And he did it and looked great doing it. So to be honest, that was a trait for me that I really like to see. So, a lot of people have him higher than this. Some people have him lower. They discounted him because of that slow 40 time. But, this is where he falls for me, and he has a chance to be a 3-down back. I think that this is a fairly clear tier break for me between the top 2 guys, the next 2 guys I'll have, and then basically everybody else. And the rankings can go any which way after these 2 guys, and then you can put these next 2 guys however you want, and you'll see how I do in a second here. So there you go. At number 3, I got Isaiah Spiller from Texas A&M. All right, coming in at number 2, I've got Breece Hall from Iowa State. Player comp I have for him is Melvin Gordon. People are probably going to hate on that because everybody thinks he's Jonathan Taylor 2.0, better than Jonathan Taylor, all this kind of stuff. But, if you look through the career stats of Melvin Gordon, he had a very, very, very quality career so far, and he's not done. So I think that's a great comp. But the reality is, between these 2 guys, I had Kenneth Walker ahead of Breece Hall very, very early in my process, and nothing made me change it. That's just what it is. None of the testing, while watching tape, of other guys, maybe I saw something, or rewatching it. I just didn't. I couldn't justify moving him down. Not to say that there's, like Kenneth Walker is that much better than Breece Hall. I think it's just these 2 guys, and you can have them in any order. Guys are willing to die on the hill of Breece Hall is the next great running back. He's going to, set records or something like that. I think these 2 guys are both going to be very good running backs, and landing spot and draft capital is going to be what separates them. And I think they both probably get equal, capital and landing spots. So, we'll see. Maybe if one goes to Houston, one goes to the Jets, there might be some differences there. I don't know. We'll see what happens, but they're both studs in my opinion. Looking at the stat line, obviously another Big 12 guy. He was fantastic. The biggest thing that people say about Breece Hall is that he has pass catching ability. I'm not going to disagree. It's just that he was the offense. He was the offense for this team for, at the very least, the past 2 seasons at Iowa State. He was everything in this offense. What I do really like about him is, he finds the tiniest holes, or he's just so patient that he just pops out the back and he runs for a, 40-yard touchdown. And I really love seeing that on tape. I did. Don't get me wrong. I loved everything I saw on tape with this guy. And I think he's the clear 1A, 1B to the guy I have at number 1. So, people might hate on this, and it is, I don't don't really care. It is what it is. I've always had, from the start till right now, I've had Kenneth Walker as my number 1 running back and Breece Hall as my number 2. Nothing made me change. They both ran fast at the combine. They both had good measurables. Everything was great there. So I couldn't just do it for consensus sakes. I'm not that guy. So it is what it is. I have Kenneth Walker as my number 1 running back, which you'll see in a second. But here we go. Number 2, Breece Hall from Iowa State. So like I was saying there, I got Kenneth Walker. Number 1, Michigan State. Player comp I have for him is Dalvin Cook. I think that he can catch the ball, again, in a similar fashion that Dalvin Cook does. And you're going to tell me that he can't catch the ball is what you're going to say, probably. And that's what people have been saying in the Twitterverse, that, you know, the reason why Breece Hall is number 1 because he catches the ball. Listen, at Wake Forest and Michigan State, they never had pass catching running backs ever. Like going back, I went back a few years, and the most catches by a running back in either of these offenses was like 10. It's not a lot. They just don't run their offense that way. Anytime that I saw Kenneth Walker get a target in the passing game, he looked great. He can absolutely catch the ball. You know, Jonathan Taylor, and I'm not comparing him to Jonathan Taylor, but Jonathan Taylor didn't catch the ball a lot in college either. Does it mean he can't do it? Of course not. Look at him now. He absolutely can excel, and I think that Kenneth Walker can there as well. Will he have to learn and kind of play a little bit of catch-up? Sure. He can do that in one season in an NFL franchise with NFL coaching where he's getting, you know, the attention that he needs to improve in that area. I'm not concerned about Kenneth Walker not being able to catch the ball. I think he's absolutely a 3-down back. I think he's an absolute stud. Looking at his stat line, that's insane. And if you watch tape on him, are you going to tell me that he's not a stud running back? If you're, you know, like I said earlier with the Breece Hall, there's a clear tier break from Kenneth Walker and Breece Hall. Order them however you wish. Kenneth Walker, Breece Hall, clear tier break, and everybody else. And I think that no one out there would dispute that. I really, really think that no one else would say. A lot of people are trying to say that there's a tier break from Breece Hall, but that's just a little bit silly, I think. So, you know, look at this again, look at the stat line, watch the tape. And that's the biggest thing. A lot of these guys that are saying these things on the Twitterverse, these pundit analysts, not that I'm not, because I'm absolutely one as well, but they're saying that, you know, oh, the stats don't back up, blah, blah, blah. Watch the tape. You watch the tape and tell me that I'm wrong, because I know that I'm not. So it is what it is, but there you go. Again, as we always say with Off The Schneid, if you're afraid to be wrong, you'll never be right. So at number 1, I've got Kenneth Walker from Michigan State. That's your 2022 of Off The Schneid top 10 running back rankings in preparation for the 2022 NFL Draft. We'll see you on the next episode.